Hello, good evening. Welcome all and any. I'm actually going to put this cap on. My curls just fell straight out, you know. But Journeys Out of the Body by Robert A. Monroe. So good. Gotta get more in on this, right? So we're going into 13 tonight. It's the chapter is called The Second Body. All right, let's do it. The greatest proof of the existence of any particular phenomenon is consistency through repeated observation. Only through such reasonably careful analytical experiments, or as much so as I could make them, did I come to the conclusion of the unqualified existence of the second body. I do presume that all of us have one. I cannot conceive of being that unique. If it exists, what is it like? What are its characteristics? Through several hundred tests, here are excerpts from the notes. June 11th, 1958, afternoon. I opened my eyes again, and everything seemed normal, except the vibration and the roar rumble still in my head. I closed my eyes, and they both grew in strength. I decided to try to lift up, and I floated up off the couch, over the center of the room, and floated downward very gently, like a feather falling. I touched the floor, and my head and shoulders seemed to be against the rug, with my hips and feet angling up into the air. It was as if my head had more weight than the rest of me, more more gravitic action, but all of me was gently attached to the earth. I still seemed to have weight, little as it was. Hey, Rose, welcome back. Good to see ya. July 19th, 1958, afternoon. I was again on the couch, feeling very smooth vibrations. I opened my eyes and looked around, and everything seemed normal, and the vibrations were still there. I then moved my arms, which were folded, and stretched them upward as I lay on my back. They felt outstretched, and I was surprised. And this is in parentheses, I am proper use of the word astounded, when I looked, for there were my arms still folded over my chest. I looked upward to where I felt them, and I saw the shimmering outlines of my arms and hands in exactly the place they felt they were. I looked back at the folded arms, then at the bright shadow of them outstretched. I could see through them to the bookshelves beyond. It was like a bright, glowing outline which moved when I felt them move, or made them move willingly. I wiggled my fingers, and the glowing fingers wiggled, and I felt them wiggle. I put my hands together, and the glowing hands came together, and I felt my hands clasp each other. They felt just like ordinary hands, no different. Damn, Bean. Hey, Hub, welcome. Welcome in. Hey, Cool Gamer, welcome. This is so good, right? So, did I read the rest of that? They felt just like ordinary hands, no different. For nearly 10 minutes, I lay there, attempting to compare this strange evidence, to determine differences. Visually, I could see my arms folded over my chest. Simultaneously, I could see the glowing outline of my hands and arms reaching out above me. I tried to move the physical arms, but could not do so. I tried to move the glowing arm outlines, and they worked perfectly. I tried to feel with my physical arms, but could determine no sensation. With the glowing outline arms, I clasped my hands together, and they felt completely normal. I rubbed the outline hands over each outline forearm, and the arm felt normal, solid to the touch. Wait, is he talking about the glowing arms right now? Yeah. With the glowing outline arms, I clasped my hands together, and they felt completely normal. I rubbed the outline hands over each outline forearm, yeah, outline hands, and the arms felt normal, solid to the touch. I moved one outline hand to the shelf by the cot, and I couldn't feel the shelf. My outline hand went right through it. Wow. Right? The vibrations started to fade, and I quickly moved the glowing outline arms and hands back to my chest. I felt exactly as if I slipped on long sleeved gloves, and then I could move my physical arms. Long sleeve gloves. I didn't want to get caught outside, even just my arms, without the vibrations. I don't know what would happen, if anything, and maybe I don't want to find out. May 5th, 1960, night. Several times I had felt someone, a body, warm and alive, pressed against my back the moment I left the physical body. After my experience with the thought forms and the others, I had naturally become quite cautious. Each time I felt this entity on my back, I quickly moved back into the physical. I was sure that it was more of the thought children or perhaps some sex distorted being, although I had detected no sexual overtones. I was prudent, not exactly prudish, but certainly frightened. The latter impression was confirmed when I noticed that the face resting on the back of my non physical neck had whiskers, strong whiskers, like a man needing a shave. Also, I could hear the panting of his breath right in my ear. This was no mild thought child. It was an adult male, panting with passion, thoroughly sexually deviated. Or why would he pick on me? Another male? Would I have felt differently if it had been a female form? In all honesty, I'm sure I would have. I have to get him away from me. Wow. May 22nd, 1960, night. The whiskers were the clue. I need no longer worry about the man on my back. He's still there, but now I know who he is. This time, after being scared back into the physical some 5 times, I got up a little more courage. I moved out slowly, just out of the physical, and felt the body on my back, the same as before, the whiskered head on the back of my neck, the panting in my ear. Carefully, so the movement would not be taken as a hostile one, I reached back and moved the palm of my hand over the face behind me. It had whiskers, and they were very real. The panting continued. The body stayed there, pressed to my back. So I re-entered the physical. This is so weird. Bamboo, Mattman, Kimba, welcome everyone. This is so cool. This is so cool and weird. I love it. Holy majoli. He stayed pressed to my back, so I re-entered the physical. I sat up physically and thought about it. As I did so, I pensively moved my hand across my chin. I needed a shave. I thought absently, then stopped. I rubbed my chin again. The feeling was too familiar, just exactly the same as when I rubbed the chin of could it be? Then I noticed that my throat was dry, as if I had been breathing through my mouth, as one does when ... There was one way to find out. I lay down, and after a short while, I was able to generate the vibrations. Slowly, I moved out of the physical. Yes, I felt it. There was the body again, the whiskers against my neck, the panting in my ear. I reached back carefully and felt the face with the whiskers. It was the same as my own. I held my breath, or thought of doing, and the panting stopped in my ear. I breathed again, once, twice, then held my breath again. The body behind me panting in exact synchronization. The warm body clinging to my back was me. I went back into the physical, sat up, and thought about it. The question is, which was which? Thinking it over, it seemed that the one in back, the one I could hear and feel, was the physical I, and the I in front was the mental or real I. I assume this because the physical sensations and related action were in the real body, while thought was in the front I. Confusing, but very real. From then on, I had no problem when I experienced the sensation. Speak of people being afraid of their own shadows. Tanya, welcome in. Awesome. August 8th, 1960, afternoon. I conducted another interesting experiment. After lying down and working through the count-up procedure, the vibrations surged in strong and rough, then smoothed as they took on a more rapid frequency, starting just around 30 CPS, as nearly as I can determine, and speeding up until I felt them only as a sense of warmth. CPS. Something per second. Anybody? CPS? Frequencies, waves. Well, I'm looking it up. CPS in relation to waves. Okay. What does CPS mean? No, not Child Protective Services. Okay, just let's say CPS waves. Cycles per second. Cool, of course. Oops. Starting at just around a more rapid frequency, starting at just around 30 cycles per second, as nearly as I can determine, and speeding up until I felt them only as a sense of warmth. I decided to lift out slowly to examine the process. I tried, and out came the glowing legs, then the hips, but no more. I couldn't get my chest and shoulders out, try as I might. It was very strange. I spent the entire time moving the legs and hips up and down. I observed them visually with my physical eyes, which seemed to be astigmatic. Several times, I tried moving my legs up out of the physical, then to the right, and then let them fall. When I did, they floated slowly down, touched the side of the couch, then draped over to the floor. They bent around and over the edge of the couch as if they had no bones, just like a slow-motion version of a piece of cloth falling loosely and bending where it made contact with a solid object. There was no noticeable after effect when I re-entered and sat up. Time away was 22 minutes. Code! Welcome in! Yay! Woo woo woo! This is so juicy. September 16th, 1960, afternoon. I was out of the physical again on a Saturday, trying to keep local, i.e., staying in the same room. Again, I noticed the strange rubbery elasticity of this other body. I could stand in the middle of the room and reach out to touch the wall some 8 feet away. At first, my arm didn't come anywhere near the wall. Then I kept pushing my hand outward, and suddenly the texture of the wall was against my hand. Just by pushing out, my arm had stretched to twice its length without my noticing anything different. When I relaxed the pushing out, The arm came back and seemed normal. This confirms the other evidence that you can make it just about whatever shape you think of, consciously or unconsciously. If left alone, it reverts to your normal humanoid shape. If you consciously think it into a given shape, I suspect you take that form. You might convert temporarily into the shape of, for example, a cat or a dog. Could this be the source of the werewolf and vampire bat mythology? I'm not so sure I want to give it a try. I wonder if this guy still alive? I hope so. Well, I mean, I know he has other books out. I wonder what his thoughts are now. This is like 50 years ago. And I mean, it doesn't, right? This is what happened then, right? But like, dang. Crystal Shaman, welcome. Yay! Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So let me get a sip and then. September 10th, 1962, night, 10:10. Is that, wait. Let's try that again. October. I'm a dork. October 10th, 10:10, 1962, night. I have found another clue to the how do you think or how do you look when you're not physical question. In the early evening, around 7:30, I decided to try to visit RW in her apartment some 8 miles distant. I was sure she would be awake, non-physically, of course. I had no difficulty and found myself immediately in a living room. There was what I thought to be RW sitting in a chair near a bright light. I moved toward her, but she didn't seem to pay any attention to me. Then I was sure she saw me, but she seemed frightened. I backed away, then started to speak, but something pulled me back to the physical, and I found myself in my bedroom, in the physical, the vibrations fading. The reason for recall was that my arm was asleep and tingling from lack of circulation. I was lying on it the wrong way. There was a most unusual aftermath. The next day, RW asked me what I was doing the night before. I asked her why, and she stated, I was sitting in the living room after supper, reading the paper. Something made me look up, and there, on the other side of the room, was something hanging and waving in the air. I asked her what it looked like. It was like a filmy piece of gray chiffon, she said. I could see the wall and chair behind it, and it started to come toward me. I was frightened, but I thought it might be you, so I said, Bob, is that you? But it just hung there in midair, waving slightly. I then asked again if it was you, and if so, please go home and don't bother me. Then it backed away and faded out quickly. She asked if it was really me, and I said I thought it might be. Well, next time, say something so I'll be sure it's you, she answered. Then I won't be so scared. I assured her I would. At least I'm not a very bright-hued ghost, and I don't have human shape something, and I don't have human shape sometimes. November 21st, 1962, night. This time, I decided to make it a purely local trip. I started to float across the room toward the door. Then I remembered that I don't need to use doors under these conditions. I turned and went straight to the wall, expecting to slide right through it. I didn't. When I came up against the wall, I seemed to be unable to penetrate it. It felt just like a wall when you physically push against it with your hands. I reasoned that there was something wrong. I have been through walls easily before. I should have been able to go through it. With this, I pushed my outstretched arms against the wall. There was a moment of resistance. Then I went through, just as easily as if the wall were water. But there was one difference. As I went through to the outside, I felt an indefined every layer in Hmm. No, that's not what it says. I felt and identified every layer of material in the wall: the paint, the plaster, the lath, the sheathing, and finally the shingles on the outside. It was much like the hand through the floor. Why the unusual resistance at the first try? February 15th, 1963, night. This was a most unusual experiment. After lifting out easily and holding control in the same room, I finally got up the courage to go back and carefully examine the physical body remaining on the bed. I started down slowly, reaching out in the semi darkness. There was only light from the twilight through the windows, and I couldn't see too well, and perhaps this was good. There was some kind of revulsion about seeing, or there is some kind of revulsion about seeing your own physical body. I reached down carefully to touch my physical head, and my hands touched feet. At first, I thought I had drifted somewhere else, and I felt my toes. My left big toe has a thick nail due to a long ago mashing by a dropped log. This big toe, left, did not. I felt with my hands to the right foot. The big toe on the right foot did have a thick nail. Everything was reversed, like a mirror image. I felt up the body slowly, and from the toe on, I couldn't tell if it was reversed or not. Dude! The point is, I could feel the physical. My hands didn't seem simply to go through it. It was very eerie to feel my face with the closed eyes, as if it were another person's. I got close enough actually to see the face. It was I, all right, but just a little distorted. Either that, or I'm a lot less acceptable looking than my ego and pride will admit to. I never have thought myself to be handsome, but at least I thought I was a little better than this. Strange, the reversal. Floating in the half darkness, I could have swung around and become disoriented, but the thick nail was on the right foot instead of the left. I must examine this further. March 18th, 1960, night. A query from Dr. Bradshaw prompted this one. After being out and close by, I thought I would try to find out if I wear clothes in the non physical to try to answer his question. I had never bothered to find out before. I suppose basically because I don't have too much of a preoccupation with clothes. They are for me principally for comfort and warmth. I felt my second non physical body. There was skin with goosebumps, but no clothes. Not this time, anyway. February 23rd, 1963, night. I got out of the physical by the log roll process, then started across the room. Something seemed to be holding me back. It was like trying to walk slowly in water, pulling with arms and legs and getting nowhere. Suddenly, there was a tug at my back, not painful, and I cartwheeled backward in an arc, feet overhead, and re entered the physical. I sat up physically, and someone was knocking at the door. My daughter. It was in parentheses. What was it that pulled me back so defiantly? The cord I have since read of? Isn't this fascinating? July 7th, 1960, afternoon. This was an experiment I didn't want to try again. I was in the charged Faraday cage, copper screen mesh above ground, DC charge 50 kV. Shoot, what's kV stand for? kV? Kilowatts? What does it mean? I attempted to move through the cage. I got out of the physical okay. Then I seemed to be entangled in a large bag made of flexible wire. The bag gave when I pushed against it, but I couldn't go through it. I struggled like a trapped animal in a snare, and finally went back to the physical, into the physical. In thinking it over, quite evidently, it was not the wire itself, but the electrical field pattern set up in fundamentally the same shape as the cage, but more flexible. Maybe this could be the basis for a ghost catcher. Kilovolts. Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. October 30th, 1960, afternoon. At about 3:15, I lay down with the intent of going to visit EW in his house some 5 miles distant. After some difficulty, I managed to move into the vibrational state, then out into the room, away from the physical. With a mental aim at EW, I took off and moved slowly, comparatively. I suddenly found myself over a business street, moving slowly about 25 feet above the sidewalk, just above the top edge of the second-story windows. I recognized the street to be the main street of the town, and recognized the block and corner over which I passed. I drifted along over the sidewalk for several minutes and noticed a filling station on the corner, where a white car had both rear wheels off in front of two open grease rack doors. I was disappointed in that I had not gone to EW, my destination. Seeing nothing else of interest, I decided to return to the physical, and did so without incident. Upon return, I sat up and tried to analyze why I had not gone where I intended. On an impulse, I got up, went down to the garage, and drove the 5 miles to his town. My thought was at least to make the trip profitable and check on what I saw. I got to the same corner on Main Street, and there was the white car in front of the two open doors. Little evidential pieces like that help. I looked up at the approximate position. Doesn't this just blow your minds? I just love it. It blows my mind. I looked up at the approximate position I had been over the sidewalk, and got a surprise. At just about the exact height I had floated over the sidewalk were power primaries containing fairly high voltage electrical current. Do electrical fields attract this second body? And is the second body the human biofield? I mean, it is, isn't it? Our torus? Like little spinning vehicles. I got a couple appointments with this lady named Bethany Pittman, and I think she's in Medina, for the human biofield tuning sessions with the tuning forks. Yeah, I got the 3-session package. Oh my goodness. So, Monday the 6th. That's my first appointment. I'm really looking forward to it. Also, I'd really like to go back and see that other amazing lady. That was something. Is this the medium through which it travels? Okay, so it says, do electrical fields attract the second body? Is this the medium through which it travels? So that was like energy plasma. Genevieve! Yay! Awesome! Tonight I finally reached EW at home. It seems that my aim wasn't too far off. At approximately 3:25, EW was walking down Main Street, and I was following directly over him as neatly as we can figure. Hot damn, dudes! It's almost like second guessing ourselves. Oh my gosh, fire outside. Awesome! Magic. January 9th, 1961, night. In response to a question brought up in discussion with Mrs. Bradshaw, I decided to see if there truly was a cord between the physical and the second body. In the past, I had not noticed any, if there was, except for an odd tugging action at times. With this in mind, I went through the memory procedure. In the late afternoon near dusk, I worked out of the physical via axis rotation and remained in the room several feet up and away from the physical. I turned to look for the cord, but it was not visible to me. Either it was too dark or not there. Then I reached around my head to see if I could feel it coming out the front, top, or back of my head. As I reached the back of my head, my hand brushed against something, and I felt behind me with both hands. Whatever it was extended out from a spot in my back directly between my shoulder blades, as neatly as I can determine, not from the head, as I expected. I felt the base, and it felt exactly like the spread out roots of a tree radiating out from the basic trunk. The roots slanted outward and into my back, down as far as the middle of my torso, up to my neck, and into the shoulders on each side. I reached outward, and it formed into a cord, if you can call a 2-inch thick cable a cord. I was hanging loosely, and I could feel its texture very definitely. It was body warm to the touch and seemed to be composed of hundreds, thousands, or question mark thousands, of tendon-like strands packed neatly together, but not twisted or spiraled. It was flexible and seemed to have no skin covering. Satisfied that it did exist, I took off and went. Wow! What was I watching or reading? It was something about talking about where is the seat of consciousness, and in different cultures, it's laying in different places. Some cultures have believed that our consciousness lies in our heart, and others have believed in our guts. And in our current paradigm, most people believe it resides in our head, in our mind. But our body is inside our mind, bumping up against everyone else's. Wow, right? What a this matrix. And took off and went. It's like a blood root. Wow. The basic characteristics noted have been confirmed many other times in various ways. Still, there appears to be no method to validate such evidence except by personal experience and observation by others. Perhaps this will come in time. Let us see, then, what we have learned from the preceding. First, this second body has weight as we understand it. It is subject to gravitational attraction, although much less than the physical body. The physicist might explain this, of course, by saying that it is a question of mass, and anything that can interpenetrate a wall must have so little density as to be able to sift through the space between the molecular matter structure. See, like all this stuff, like I appreciate it so much, and I am so thankful for the way this guy analyzes things. But right, all the subjectivity, because it's like so cool. It's like through this lens, this is the language through. as subjective. Yeah. As unsubjective. Or wait. What am I trying to say here? I mean, like the programs we run, right? That's the lenses we're writing through. So, okay. Such little density implies very little mass, but it still may be matter. This is further supported by the half-out experiment, where the legs and hips were separated, then allowed to drift downward and drape over the bed. The lower density mass fell as a feather would fall. Pushing through the wall may be an example also. The initial resistance may be caused by some form of surface tension, vibrationally speaking, which, once broken, permits the less dense mass to pass between the wall molecules. Perhaps some speculative physicist can take it from there. Second, this second body is visible under certain conditions. To be visible, it must either reflect, or radiate light in the known spectrum, or at least a harmonic in this area. A harmonic. Dude. Sound. Light. Does light have harmonics? I mean, it vibrates at different. I did make this hat. I think it's just double crochet, but it's like a specific pattern, right? I think it's called basket weave, maybe. But I start at the top. Oh no, this one I didn't start at the top. This one was just like a rectangle, and then I like sewed it together, and just like on the back. Light to sound, right? Gosh, it's amazing. Everything, so synergistic, right? Like, or at least a harmonic in this area. Based upon the report in the arms and legs experiment, I seem to be viewing radiated light, but only around the perimeter of the body form. The rest was invisible under daylight conditions. It must be considered, too, that my perceptual and sensory mechanisms may or must have been in some heightened or altered condition which made this seeing possible. The gray chiffon, seen by R.W. under artificial light and in a fully conscious state, may be something else again. From the description, this may fall in the reflected light category. Taken as reported, there evidently are conditions where a fully conscious observer can be visually aware of the presence of the second body. Which such conditions are, I do not know. Third, the sense of touch in the second body seems to be very similar to that in the physical, i.e., when the hands felt each other, the sensations seemed identical. The same seemed true in that report of the search for the cord. The hands could feel and touch the non-physical self, and it was flesh touching flesh according to the sensory receptors. With the exception of the hair follicle type of skin protuberations. Oh my gosh, dudes. The nervous system, the electrical system. Mr. Hugh, welcome. It's like being informed by spirit at all times, right? Isn't that what we're learning right now? Like, from that other part of this ness of reality. Also, there are indicators or indications that the non physical hands can touch the physical body with much the same result, as witness the experiment with the return from direct examination, beginning with the toes. This is borne out again in the man on the back experience when I felt the physical body in direct proximity with the non physical parts of the body other than my hands. It would seem that in a so called local condition, the second body can perceive and touch physical objects as well. Fourth, the second body is very plastic and may take whatever form is suitable to or desired by the individual. The ability to stretch out the arm to 3 times its normal length points to such elasticity. Extrapolated, one could conceive of the entire non physical travel as the incredible stretching out of some substance emanating from the physical, the snap back to the physical when the desire or will to stay out is terminated, lands credence to the idea. The appearance of the second body as a waving piece of filmy cloth, as a waving piece of filmy cloth defies analysis of any kind to date, but may again indicate plasticity. If no special form is transmitted by the mind or will at a given moment, we can assume that the familiar humanoid shape is maintained through some automatic thought habituality, a habitude. You know, when I was reading that about RW seeing the shape forming, it made me think of what's that movie? Haunted. Shit, is that what it's called? Damn, Bean. The one with Liam Neeson, where he's like the psychiatrist that sets up the false thing, the study. Owen Wilson, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Hugh. Anyways, the children, when like they're like floating in the that one scene to, what is her name, Jillian's bed or something like that. That's the image that came to mind when I read that. What is that movie called? Anyone? The Haunting? I don't know. So, the appearance of the second body as a waving piece of filmy cloth defies analysis of any kind to date, but may again indicate plasticity. If no special form is transmitted by the mind or will at a given moment, we can assume that the familiar humanoid shape is maintained through some automatic thought habituality. I realize I read that all, but I just kept on reading it again. Fifth, there exists the possibility that the second body is a direct reversal of the physical. This is supported by the log rolling rotational separation and by the experiment involving the exploration of the physical body as it lay inert on the couch. There was the head to foot discovery, which may well be explained by the dislocation in semi-darkness. However, coupled with the big toe identification, it deserves consideration. There are suggestions of this in other reports, which were relegated initially to disorientation and purely subjective responses. The reversal concept may in some way have an association with an antimatter theory. And isn't it fascinating how like our eyes and the cones, they flip everything? Jackie, welcome in, my girl. Welcome. Awesome. Yeah, shit. Sixth, direct investigation tends to support the premise of a connecting cord between the physical and the second body, as described many times through the ages in esoteric literature. What purpose is served by the connecting link is at this time unknown. It can be speculated that the second body and the intelligence inhabiting it still exert control over the physical via this communicating link. It seems probable that messages also travel by this method to the second body from the physical. It's as witness the call to return from the poor circulation in the cramped arm and the warning knock on the door. It's a matrix, It's like a holographic matrix. If the connection is maintained, it must be truly a highly elastic substance, much like the second body itself, in order to stretch the seemingly infinite distances called for. Seventh, the relationship between the second body and electricity and electromagnetic fields is quite significant. The experiment in the Faraday cage points to this, as does the positioning of the second body over the street, in or adjacent to the field set up by the primary electrical current or in the electrical current itself. So what's 5G do? Dang, 46 minutes. Is this a teeny weeny chapter? It's pretty small. Okay, we're going to do it. 14. Mind and Supermind. Having described the physical aspects of the second body, it would seem most important to examine how the mind apparently operates in reaction to the second body experience. Students of the mental sciences may dispute the terminology used herein, since no attempt is made here to review the phenomenon in psychiatric, psychological, and physiological terms. Rather, it is hoped that this section, as well as the previous one, will have common meanings for all sciences and scientific minds, and that it will act as a bridge to further exploration for every intellectual interest. The question posed most often is, how do you know you aren't dreaming? That what you experience is nothing more than a vivid dream or hallucination of some sort? This does deserve some answer other than the counter question, how do I know my waking experience is real? As reported elsewhere, I was certain that these experiences were dreams or hallucinations for a long period in the early stages. They were seriously considered as something more only when evidential data begins to accumulate. The experiences differ from the typical dream state principally in the following ways. 1. Continuity of some sort of conscious awareness. 2. Intellectual or emotional, or blends of the two, decisions made during the experiences. 3. Multi-valued perception via sensory inputs or their equivalents. 4. Non-recurrence of identical patterns. And 5. Development of events in sequence that seem to indicate a time lapse. Time. The most certain statement that can be made is that when the condition exists, you are as aware of not dreaming as you are when you are awake. The same standards of wakefulness can be applied with the same positive result. This is what is so discerning or disconcerting in the early experimentation. The duality of existence is completely contradictory to all available scientific training and human experience. Again, the ultimate proof of such affirmation is to experience oneself in this state of being. Is this a product of self-hypnosis with attendant post-hypnotic suggestion? Quite probably the method of induction and establishment of the condition relates to hypnosis in many ways. Hypnosis itself is a phenomenon of which very little is understood. Suggestion, as employed by hypnosis, may be part of the activation process. However, great care has been taken to avoid any indirect suggestion or any stimuli that would induce hallucinating experience or hallucinated experience. When more is known of the factors involved in hypnosis, an interrelationship with the practices involved here may appear. If the mind does not act differently, what are the points of diversion? Generally, it seems that the conscious mind, or the entirety of the individual, gradually passes through a learning process. In retrospect, the effect is an evolutionary adaptation and acceptance of the conscious mind into a relegated portion of a whole. The total is an equal blend of conscious, unconscious, and supermind, transcendent self, all fully aware of the others. However, this amalgamation is effective only in the second state. If it continues in physical environment, the effect is noticeable only to a limited degree. In the earlier penetration into the second state, thought and action are dominated almost entirely by the unconscious, subjective mind. Attempts at rational understanding seem buried in an avalanche of emotional reaction. All primary subjective drives are strongly evident, demanding to be heeded and/or satisfied. It is impossible to deny their existence. Basic fears which you believe to be erased are the first to come forth. These are followed or joined by the equally strong drive for sexual union, which will be examined elsewhere. Together, these present two solid strikes against continued development of the second state. Throughout mankind's history, fear and sexuality have been the major motivating and control characteristics in all forms of social organization. It is therefore understandable that they play such a vital part in the second state. Slowly, the conscious mind begins to act upon this apparently unorganized, illogical mass to bring order and objective perception into it. In the beginning, it seems an impossible task. In the later stages, the conscious mind develops a symbiotic relationship with it. Only rarely do matters get out of hand. This is not to say that the conscious mind is in full control in the second state. Rather, it is merely a modulator of a master or driving force. Who is the master? Call it supermind, soul, greater self. The label isn't important. It is important to know that the conscious mind automatically responds to commands of the master without question. In the physical state, we seem only dimly aware of this. In the second state, it is a natural occurrence. The supermind knows unquestionably what is right. The problems result only when the conscious mind stubbornly refuses to recognize this superior knowledge. The source of knowledge of the supermind leads down many avenues, most of which seem beyond our conscious mind world perception. That's conscious-mind-world perception. Heredity is the most acceptable of these, and the most insufficient. With this continuing adaptation in progress, we can deduce certain observable premises. These lead to conclusions applicable to the second state environment. Thought, action, synchronicity. Whereas in the physical state, action follows thought, here there are only the same. There is no mechanical translation of thought into action. One gradually appreciates the existence of thought as a force in itself rather than as a trigger or a catalyst. Man, that makes me think that Earth is a place that teaches us how to think, right? Huh. I wonder. Okay. So one gradually appreciates the existence of thought as a force in itself rather than as a trigger or catalyst. It is primarily an emotional thought force, which is gradually molded into coherent action. It is the thought of movement that creates the action. It is the thought of the person to be visited that determines the destination. Also, it is the supermind's needs that create movement into unknown areas, often without an immediate conscious awareness of the moving forces or of the motivating forces. Thought patterns carried over from the physical activities strongly influence responses in the second state of existence. It is astounding to discover how many small thought habits one has grown, and how embarrassed one often feels at the automatic quality of them. Although no purely physical habits, needs, or desires, i.e., hunger, pain, smoking, seem to be carried over as such, minor annoying thought patterns and conditioning appear to confuse and divert attention. The exception to all of this is the sexual drive, and even this is tainted by artificial social standards and the habits they have produced. Here's an illustration of a minor habit carryover from the notes. June 11th, 1963, night. ... When they came close to me, each taking an arm to lead me through the area, my hand went to my right chest pocket. To feel if the bulk of my wallet was still there, so that it would not be taken. It took some moment to realize that there was no wallet, perhaps no coat, nor was there any intent on the part of the two who held me to take my non existent wallet. This is the price of living in crowds in the big city. Little habits like these do get in the way, and you run into them again and again. The method of disposal is to recognize them one by one. Once they are identified, they are no longer bothersome. The same is true of thoughts in relation to the shape of the physical body. For example, if you have been conditioned to acute awareness of nakedness, you will automatically think you are clothed, and so you are. The form of your physical body is carried over in replica down to the last hair follicle and scar, unless you deliberately think otherwise. Conversely, if your thought habits have been in other directions, you may take whatever form is most convenient, deliberately or otherwise. I suspect that one may modify the second body into whatever form is desired. Once the thought is discarded, the second body will drop back into its habitual humanoid shape. This opens up some interesting speculation into man's mythology. If one wished to experience the existence of a quadruped, the second body might be transformed temporarily into a large dog, and someone with second state vision, there probably are many such people, might encounter a werewolf. Or the fables of half man, half goat, horse could be the result. One might think wings and fly, and be transformed momentarily into a vampire bat. It seems less impossible when one experiments with the power of thought and the second state. To put it another way, there seems to be nothing that thought cannot produce in this new old other life. This invites a note of caution in large red letters. Be absolutely sure of the results you desire, and constantly in control of the thoughts you engender. Perception changes. This is the area of most significant yet most incomprehensible alteration. Because we have learned no other way of dealing with it, all sensory input is translated at first into terms and meanings appreciated by the five physical senses. For example, when one begins to see in this unfamiliar shape, to see, the impression is that this seeing is much the same as optical reception by the physical eyes. Only later do you discover empirically that this is not the case. It isn't physical seeing at all. You learn that you can see in all directions at once, without turning the head, that you see or don't see according to the thought, and that when examined objectively, it is more an impression of radiation rather than a reflection of light waves. Oh my gosh, I just had an awesome idea. I have to write it down. shit. Okay. Cool. I don't want to forget that. I don't know where I am. Oh, okay. I think I'm right at the top here. So wait. You learn that you can see in all directions at once without turning the head, that you see or don't see according to the thought, and that when examined objectively, it is more an impression of radiation rather than a reflection of light waves. He's talked about impressions of radiation before. The same applies to other physical senses. You believe at first that you are hearing people speak to you. Early, you perceive that no ear has received a sensory message. In some way, in some other way, you have received the message, thought, and your mind has translated it into understandable words. Touch seems to have the relationship to its physical counterpart. Smell and taste have been conspicuously absent to date. Most interesting is the evidence that none of these modes of perception works wholly automatically. You seem to be able to turn them on or off at will. There also seem to be a few means of sensory input. One of these is identification of other human entities, living, dead, not by how they look, but through an undisguised awareness of their prime personality habits and thoughts. This is most remarkable because it seems infallible, with the innermost self appearing to radiate patterns. Much as the composition of a star or a piece of metal can be analyzed by its spectrograph, I suspect that such emanations cannot be shut off by the individual, so there can be no covering over of the inner self to hide it from view. Another is the ability to communicate with others at a level above conscious awareness. This has been performed with living persons awake and asleep. It is quite possible that it also takes place among people living in the physical state who are completely unaware of it. In the second state, it is specific and utterly natural. There are many incidents reported in the notes of such communication while the other person is in conscious physical conversation with a third party. The most frustrating part of this is that the communicant rarely has any memory of it afterward. Also, it is only with difficulty that such contact is opened with a person physically awake. It is like trying to rouse a person from a sound, deep sleep. It may be that this communicating portion of the mind is actually asleep during periods of physical consciousness. Free association or regressive hypnotic techniques should bring recall from such sources when needed. One problem is encountered periodically in perception during the second state. It may be more common in perception by physical means than has been reported, and thus not unique. I actually didn't hear any of that I just read. I was thinking. I'm reading it again. One problem is encountered periodically in perception during the second state. It may be more common in perception by physical means than has been reported, and thus not unique. I refer to the question of the mind's identification of persons, places, and things, which up to that moment have been unknown and unperceived previously. In the quest for evidential data and self-orientation, the mind seems to act strongly in response to an unformed thought command to identify, without modification or equivocation. Therefore, when an unknown or apparently impossible situation, place, person, or thing is encountered, the mind comes up with some kind of answer rather than no answer whatsoever. The answer takes the form of rationalization or if it can be called that. Or more commonly, a search is made of past memories and experiences to produce proper identification. It compares the situation under which the object or action is perceived with past personal experience. If there is nothing to coincide exactly with the observed data, the mind invariably reports the most similar memory and states, "This is the object or action you are seeing." It is only after critical analysis that some semblance of what actually was perceived comes to light. There are many good illustrations of this phenomenon. One of the best is the visit to Mr. Bonson's house in the morning, the mind having no reference in its memory of the object being placed in the back of the car, Van de Graaff generator. Identified properly, its approximate size, the round wheel-like protuberance on a post, and the base platform, and reported erroneously that it was a child's automobile. The mind properly reported the boy and the baseball because this was a part of its memory bank data. However, it ran into a problem on the motion of Mrs. Bonson in handing out the morning mail. This was reported as dealing cards, but the mind was faced with the incongruity of playing with large white cards, letters, at a table filled with dishes. The idea of card playing was the least impossible similar event in the memory association, so that was the unit retained. Of equal interest was the experience of the airplane crash reported in Chapter 11. Here was a whole series of events filled with much sensory data, filtered by the mind's past associations. Added to this was the rapid superimposure of information, so that the sequence of events in time added to the confusion. The impression of taking a trip by airplane was quite accurate. However, the mind forgot that there was a bus trip to the airport first. Consequently, in reporting the loading of the bus, the impression was that this was the airplane. In boarding the bus, the mind perceived the driver waiting beside the door. In an attempt to identify the man, the memory was searched, and the most similar person in past experience, DD, was selected as the person encountered. The physical similarity between the bus driver and DD, when compared later, was most remarkable. Recognition of the woman in the seat ahead and her discomfort was another form of misinterpretation. The discomfort or anxiety was accurate, the reason wrong. The mind had not determined the cause of the woman's anxiety, so it related it to the individual, as some answer was demanded. Then the flying low and slow over streets was a perfect description of the event itself, the bus traveling the turnpike to the airport, except that the mind was still fixed on the idea of flying in an airplane. The mind still held fixedly on the fact that the plane flight had already begun. Right? Because it's like plugged in. When the plane encountered the storm, the mind reported the plane flying under power and telephone wires because it could not translate directly the effect of the storm. Most significant was the mind's interpretation of the accident or catastrophe. It saw what happened to be a disruption of the heart activities. This was an impossible situation, an inconceivable event based upon its experience. In the face of this past data, the mind was forced to identify. Experience said the observed catastrophe was not possible. Therefore, it selected an airplane crash as an event that would be believed and acceptable as a possibility. From this, the difficulty of accurately reporting the observance of unknown material can be understood. If it proves this complex in familiar environments, one can well imagine what takes place when that which is perceived has no relationship whatsoever to previous experience. Only by laborious trial and error have a few facts been assembled, and these may not all be And these may not all be common with the interpretation of other minds with other experience backgrounds. This is the reason for the need for others to experience the same conditions. The entire picture may become clear with the help of such additional reports. Of the few facts that have been properly tagged, there are the flying and falling dreams. I am quite certain that such dreams are but memories of some degree of second state experience. I have often become aware of experiencing the flying dream during sleep, only to discover that I was actually floating out in the second body as I brought consciousness to the incident. This involuntary action happens most frequently without any conscious effort. It may well be that many people do have this experience during sleep, but just don't remember it. A dream of riding or flying in an airplane has a similar connotation, the mind refusing to accept the possibility of flying without mechanical help due to memory experience, conjures up an airplane to rationalize the event. Again, when consciousness and full awareness are brought into play, the airplane disappears. There you are, high in the air, with no logical means of support. It is most disconcerting until you get used to the idea. Falling dreams were also repeatedly examined in my early experiments. It is a common feeling in quick reintegration of the second body with the physical. Oh, man. I've experienced that multiple times. Hey, Alex, welcome. Hey, Prelly, welcome. Dang. Like, woke up before my second body was all the way full back in and thought I was falling. Okay. Evidently, the proximity of the physical causes it to accept relayed sensory signals from the second, which is falling into the physical. By the same token, the process of falling asleep often brings forth a sinking sensation. By trying it again and again, the effect is produced by the separation of the second from the physical, and the sensory impressions are split between the two. Perhaps the same sinking sensation takes place when one loses consciousness from other causes, such as fainting, application of anesthesia, etc. Intelligence measurement. Easy for me to say. On the surface, except for the addition of sensory abilities just noted, there seems to be no immediate opening of new vistas of knowledge and information. There is no jump in IQ by the standards applied in the physical world. There is indeed a new kind of intellect at work, but it is in a form that seems incomprehensible. This composite mind uses the experiences of living in the physical, but applies them only when they fit the event or incident. Sometimes actions take place that seem utter nonsense to the curious mind, or rather to the conscious mind, and their validity is recognized only after the event. After a significant number of experiments, it becomes aware that the conscious mind in itself, even with its memory recall patterns, is insufficient for the task of full comprehension. There is too much to be evaluated that is beyond the scope of conscious personal experience. Again, this demands a continuing need to organize the available data into comprehensive form, and to add to that body of knowledge through the evidential experience of other conscious minds. Excuse me. This conscious mind has recognized its limitations. Memory patterns. If the conscious intellect does not seem improved, the memory storehouse is another matter. One of the early changes in the gradual flooding of the memory with events, places, people, and things that have no relationship in any way to one's current physical life activities or past experience, nor do they seem to have any bearing on the visits to locales 2 or 3. The source of these memories still remains a mystery. They are sensed and recalled while in the second state. For example, I have a vivid memory of a place where I used to live, the roads leading up to it, the shape of the land, its location in relation to the road, and the surrounding landscape. It is not a good piece of land, but I seem to have worked hard for it, and it was all I could afford. I had intentions of building a house on it someday. There is a memory also of 3 connected buildings on a city street, old buildings, some 8 stories high. The top floors of these buildings, similar to old apartment buildings, have been joined into one large living area with large, high-ceilinged rooms. One has a step up or down slightly to go from one room to another due to the difference in floor levels. This was a place I visited, not too often, sometime, somewhere. There are many more, probably unimportant in relation to the whole. It is important to know, however, that these are directly the product of second state experimentation. Of what value they are, beyond to confuse, I have yet to learn. Wow. Dang. Isn't this, man, this book is, man, this next one's sexuality in the second state. Juicy, man. Oh, man, it's tiny. But I still need to shower, and I work in the morning, and balls! This is so good. Dang. All right, yeah, I'm gonna call it because it's the responsible thing to do for this physical waking body. Wow. This is so good. All these books are so good. Thank you so much. Dang, I love yous. And maybe I'll be back tomorrow. Yeah, probably. We'll see. We'll see what shakes, right? So, mwah. Until next time, whenever that may be, I love yous very much. Thank you. Have a good night, sweet dreams, or happy days.